All right, thank you for being here. Good evening. We're gonna give it a second so you guys can just grab a seat. We're set up for school tomorrow, so that's why everything's kind of spaced out. Shelly, are we good to go? All right. So thanks for being here. Good evening. Thanks to everybody in person here, anybody online that's watching as well. We're gonna go through the volunteer handbook, some highlights. So I have a presentation to kind of walk through that. It's an overview of the handbook you have in front of you or that was emailed to you. But to start off, Pastor's gonna open us in prayer as well as just some initial thoughts.
Thank you, Nick. And I just wanted to let everybody know how much I appreciate you taking time out of a busy schedule to be here either in person or online. Even though this may seem to be a little tedious as we go through it, it is very, very necessary. It's very important that we're all on the same page literally, so that we know what the expectations are, so that we follow the guidelines correctly, because much is at stake. Certainly the safety of our families and children, their health, and that we can then much more easily proclaim the gospel through our words and actions when those to whom we minister trust who we are and what the process is. So again, I want to thank everyone for taking the time tonight to go through this. I want to thank Nick in particular and our board for formulating these guidelines, reviewing them with our staff and many other key volunteers already, and then being able to share it with all of you. Special thanks as well to Chrissy Heiss, our Director of Children and Family Ministry. One of the very first things we ask you to do is, go through a new handbook, right? So we appreciate your efforts as well. So welcome. I just want to take a moment then to start us out right, which is always connecting with the Lord in prayer. So Heavenly Father, we thank you. First of all, that you are our Father and we are your children. We know how precious we are to you because of the sacrifice of your one and only Son, that he would go to the cross and die for us so that we could have a relationship with you forever. Lord, in the same way, we take our responsibility of looking after families and children, of sharing the gospel with our church and with our community. And so we want to be in parallel with you in our words and actions. We want to practice indeed what we preach. So bless us tonight as we go through this handbook, these guidelines, so that we are indeed on the same page and we are the representatives of you that we claim to be. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. As Pastor mentioned, my name's Nick Gottschalk. I'm with the Board of Governance. Just some background on this handbook. We actually initiated it last year in 2020. We instituted it with the school for January for our volunteers at January of 2020. Our Sunday school, our ushers. We were about to start to talk about VBS and then the pandemic hit. So that's why we're doing kind of a refresher, plus reaching out because of VBS is a big initiative with a lot of children involved. And then there's also a new requirement that we've included relative to mandatory reporter training, and we'll go through that in a bit, that we've added here. So that's that's a piece that we're going to walk through that's new. I will periodically check to see if Shelly has any questions online so that we can stop when it's relevant at the slides. If you have anything in a period of time that we're covering, feel free to ask. I will listen for your question. I will repeat your question, and then I will answer your question, hopefully answer your question. So as Pastor said, this is important information, so we're going to get started right now. So our agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about why a volunteer handbook. We're going to go through our mission and vision, volunteer boundaries, social media, transportation and one-on-one interactions. We'll talk about overnight policies and physical conduct, as well as intoxicants, privacy, and things like that. Then we'll get to discipline and incidents, and then the mandatory reporter training I mentioned, and then the acknowledgement and the background checks. All right. Like I said, we'll pause whenever we have any questions that are on any of the topics. So for the first thing, why a handbook? It seems, as Pastor said, tedious and a lot of work, but ultimately it's for three reasons, right? The first and most important is we're going to protect those we minister to. We need to be able to make sure that they trust us, that we're doing what we need to do to be able to have a protecting environment and keep people safe. It protects you as a volunteer, so you know what's expected of you, what's allowed, what's not allowed. And then it does protect the ministries of Emmanuel, so we can continue to minister into the community and make sure that we're here in the long run for everyone. So I'm not going to go, since the handbook is there, I'm not going to necessarily, there's some pages I'll skip a little bit. They are still important, but they're not things I'm highlighting for you. All right, so don't. This is a summary of it. The handbook itself is the read through it yourself at your own pace, but we're going to cover the highlights here. So our mission, you often hear Pastor talk about this, is touching hearts and transforming lives with the light of Christ. So that's our mission for Emmanuel, and we have a vision of being that city on a hill. And you'll hear this when you show up at a town hall meeting, a voters meeting. We reinforce that consistently, that we want to be that city on the hill. So a shining beacon for the entire Crystal Lake and surrounding communities. So we'll get into our boundaries, and I'll reference what page the stuff's on. So on page 6, you'll get into volunteer boundaries. We want to make sure that we have appropriate interactions, whether you're a staff, volunteer, anyone we serve. So we want to, if you're going to have interaction as a volunteer, you want to have it in a public location, right? You're going to have it in a classroom setting where there's other people. You're going to have it in the commons here. If you're doing something, and we'll talk about this on one-on-one interactions, but if you're in a meeting that's a little more private, it'd be kind of in the glassed-off conference room over there, so people can see you. If you're going to have to be at someone's home, so we do have visitation that does occur, and we have volunteers that visit homebound individuals, then we have a system in place where you can notify a third party. Hey, I'm going to do a visit with so-and-so. And we have a select group that is already identified as individuals that are going to do that ministry. And so they can easily check in and say, hey, we're going to do this visit. And they either tell someone on staff or the volunteer leader of that group. All right. Refrain from behavior that's misinterpreted. A lot of this stuff comes into common sense, but we have to outline it here. So make sure whatever you're doing could be interpreted and is interpreted appropriately, right? Don't avoid things that could lead to someone else coming with a different interpretation of what you're doing. Physical contact is a classic example of that. Hugs especially, when you're in the volunteer role, that needs to be initiated by, the kid is looking for the hug and reaching out to you. It's for their benefit. It's not to be initiated by us. We'll get into physical contact, high fives and things like that. That's totally acceptable. But it's a sensitive area that we have to be very careful about now. Any questions on volunteer boundaries? Shelley?
I have a question that's online. I have a mom here that has an 11-year-old, and she wants to know if this training is age appropriate for her, including the mandatory reporter training. She's going to be a VBS volunteer.
The 11-year-old? Yeah, so the mandatory reporter training is for 18-year-olds and greater. So the question is, there's an 11-year-old that's going to be participating in VBS, and is this age appropriate? I'll keep it general enough if they are sitting and going to watch, but the mandatory reporter training requirement when we get there is for 18-year-olds and older. So a 6th, 7th, 8th grader will not be required to take mandatory reporter training. Neither would early on in high school until you get to the age of 18. Yep. Any questions in the room about anything we've covered so far? All right. So another thing that I never figured we would have to cover when I was growing up is social media policy. It obviously is a big thing that's out there today. We want to make sure that we're transmitting appropriate content, especially as we're volunteers at Emmanuel or any of our staff have the same requirements. Make sure that a guide is always, regardless of, even if you're volunteering or not, you're a member of Emmanuel, what you do represents who you are as well as who we are. And think about that always, because sometimes we get carried away with some of the social media stuff. So when you're doing volunteer activities and if you're interacting and connecting with parents and making connections on Facebook or wherever else, all these social media apps, you want to make sure that we're avoiding what we recommend, what we outline here. Avoid anything that's illicit, unsavory, abusive, discriminatory, harassing, disrespectful material, right? This is a city on a hill. We're trying to be that shine the light of Christ. And if we're not doing it through social media, then that's setting the inappropriate tone. So we want to make sure we're doing our best there to be that right city on a hill. We want to make sure if we do reach out to people, we're using appropriate judgment on the time. So there's a general like home house rule back when we all had telephone lines in our house that when we reviewed it with our lawyer as well as looked at other policies that are out there, when you're calling people or when you're interacting on social media or if there's group text messages that are appropriate, between 8 a.m., 9 p.m. is the general guidelines. I know you could even say probably later than 8 a.m. sometimes, but just be aware of the time that what time you're doing that and interacting with the others. And if you're using social media to communicate, have other volunteers or manual staff be part of your group if it's a group that's set up. And avoid private messages when possible. So pretty much all the time, try to avoid the private messages. Any questions on social media? All right. We will move on to, one more piece on this. Photos and videos is important. I forgot about that. For photos and videos, we don't want to put students' names on things when we put those out there, just for privacy. And Sharon is really good about this, and Shelley as well. We need to have media release forms signed for people to have their kids' photos shown as part of promotional material. So for school at the beginning of the year, we'll have Mr. Muhlendijk will make sure we have the release form signed for maybe all, if not all. They'll know which kids are not allowed to be in the photos. And the same thing would be for VBS. We make sure we have the signed forms from the parents that are supportive of that and are allowing their kids to be part of those pictures we might post online. So that's why we don't want just volunteers taking pictures and posting them just on their own. All right, transportation, not a highly likely item for us as a group, but it does occur, especially with the youth. When we do transportation, and this is not when I have kids that play sports here at Emmanuel. If I arrange for transportation for them, that is not covered under this handbook. That's my personal arrangement with another parent to drive my kids. In this case, it would be something where Emmanuel is very clearly saying, we are going to set up the transportation. We're going to take a group of kids, we're going to figure out where they're going, and we're taking them to wall camp. Let's say that's the case. Well, they need to be transported directly to their destination. So there's obviously you can stop for washroom breaks, right, and get food if it's a far enough trip, but we're not going to other places. We know clearly, and we've been very clear with parents and guardians where we're going. We have people of the same sex in the car with them. So if you can have a male and a female adult in the car, and it's all boys in the car, that's fine, but you at least have a member of the same sex in the car. You should never be alone with a non-related adult in the vehicle. So again, you have two adults in the vehicle, and you have, in some cases, you may have the adult and their kid along with a kid, another kid that's not related in the vehicle. But we got to be aware of that and just be very careful about that process. And the best practice, like I said, is to have, so that gives you some flexibility to be within the guidelines, is to have, a male and a female adult in the car. I think there's one more slide on transportation here. Yeah, if we're providing that organized transportation, drivers under the age of 18 only can drive their siblings. And then for events longer than just a day trip, so if we're doing, that trip to wall camp and we're coming back, a week later, we should have the occupant's emergency contact information so we can get a hold of their parents. All right? Do we have any questions on that, on transportation? Like I said, not a very common one, but one we make everybody aware of. One-to-one interactions, page 10. If there is a need to meet with somebody, especially with youth individually, meet when others are present. So if there's people in the commons, you can meet in that room over there. Try to meet here at the church if possible, as much as possible, and inform Emmanuel staff for the reason for the meeting. So the staff or the head of your group of volunteers should be aware of why you're meeting with the individual, and then where you're meeting with them. And then usually what we would say is also let them know when you're done with the meeting. So that there's, we've closed out that contact, they know what's going on. It's not a very common thing that we would have a volunteer meet one-on-one with someone, but if this were to occur, work with the staff appropriately. Any questions on that? Yes, so the Shelley's comment was about Tijuana and the trip with Tijuana as an example. Making sure that very clear about transportation on that one. Is that the key? And meeting one-on-one with, yeah, when you're in Tijuana or when you're meeting with people that are part of our group for that trip, make sure that you're letting people know, at least your group leader, know that you're meeting with them. And then also when you do have a meeting, let Julie know where your location of your meeting is if you need to block out some time. So if I need to have that conference room for a meeting, let Julie Kearley know so that I can and schedule that, and she'll block that out so no one else is there. That was your whole point, right, Shelley? So I just took a long way to get there. Thanks. Overnight policies. This is something if we have one of our lock-ins overnight, we need to have at least 2 adult leaders, 21 or older, and they have to be present at all time. The pastor must approve the sleeping arrangements to make sure that those are a pastor, so it could be Pastor Erb, Pastor Padel, Pastor Tiemann. Make sure that those are covered appropriately in a permission slip. Separate rooms and accommodations or separation needs to occur. If youth are awake, 2 adult leaders need to be awake. I mean, it's kind of, again, this is common sense stuff, but we outline it. Appropriate sleeping attire needs to be worn. Staff and volunteers will conduct periodic visual bed checks, all right? Won't go and like touch the sleeping bags or anything to make sure they're there. They just look and they move on. And then we'll get to page 12, which is physical contact. So promoting a positive and nurturing environment, especially with youth, is important. Pats on the back, fist bumps, high fives, those are all important and appropriate. Again, what I mentioned earlier, it should be in observable places. So in the commons or in front of other people, make sure the appearance, there's never an appearance of wrongdoing. It's appropriate things. And it needs to be for the benefit of the kids. It's about the kids. So make sure that it's something in the open. Again, easiest thing is stick to kind of pats on the back, fist bumps, high fives. If you have any inappropriate behavior that you suspect or abuse that you suspect, it should be immediately reported. We're going to talk about mandatory reporter training that will cover that, as well as let the staff know, whoever's in charge of your ministry. Then we go to page 13, intoxicants, privacy, and things like that. So volunteers can't possess or be under the influence of alcohol and drugs. They need to make sure while they're on Emmanuel facilities, traveling or working with staff, members, volunteers, or any person we serve, you can't be in possession or under the influence. Appropriate attire and accommodations are required. So if we do have something like a pool party that we're sanctioning, we just need to make sure we have a place for people to change appropriately. That's where they can do that and be alone to change their clothes. Parents who leave youth in the care of staff or volunteers during a church or related activity will be contacted if the child becomes ill, injured, or severe disciplinary issues. And we'll talk about disciplinary issues in a little bit, but that's kind of an obvious thing we need to make sure that the parents are aware. Any questions on that section? And then we go into restroom guidelines. These are really good guidelines for you, especially with the youth. If you're dealing with a nursery or if you're in kind of the preschool age group. If the child is not potty trained, find the parent. That's a nursery. You know, they're in the nursery. Find the parent. The parent can take them to the restroom. Never go into. So in some of our classrooms, we have a single bathroom. That the child goes in the stall by themselves. You can coach them from outside the door. You never go in there with them. If you're in the multi-stall restrooms, which are the restrooms over here, you can go into the restroom, not into the stall with the kid, and coach them again as necessary. And you can help them wash their hands. So those are just the general guidelines. If you need to get some assistance, you know, find the parents. If we're in a service or something, absolutely do that. But again, non-potty trained kids, we definitely need to find the parents and have them take care of that. Questions on restroom guidelines? All right. Yeah, that's the non-potty trained aspect, yes. So parents parents are responsible for the diaper changes. As much as you might want to just, you know, no, you're beyond that? Okay. Yeah, me too. All right, parental involvement, mature conversations. So there are times where, you know, parents want to visit or see what's going on at VBS or in Sunday school. Absolutely, we encourage that. If they want to have continuous contact with that classroom, then we need to encourage them to follow the volunteer handbook, you know, go through the background check, everything else. But if they're stopping in to see what's going on with their kids and you as a volunteer are in charge of that Sunday school class or that VBS group, absolutely fine. But if they're going to continually be helping out, our school moms or dads that come and visit or do lunchroom duty, they sign the handbook because they're consistent to be here, right? They're not just stopping in to check on the kid, drop off a lunch and leave. Mature conversations may occur in the junior high and the senior high youth groups. And as much as possible, we will try to give parents a heads up on that. But these lessons will cover LCMS church doctrine. They will stick to church doctrine. So we will try at our best to have our leaders, as those conversations come up, make sure that they let the parents know in advance this is kind of where this general topic may go, and cover that appropriately. And parents can make the appropriate decisions there if they want to opt out of those sessions. Questions around parental involvement? We also have staff and volunteers are prohibited from possessing, you know, explicit material in the presence on property or in the presence of staff, volunteers, people we serve. Kind of common sense stuff here. All right, discipline and incident reporting. So minor offenses, I mean, there's always going to be some interactions we have with kids where they may not be getting along with someone else, or they may just be having a bad day. Try to redirect them. Some of us are better at verbally redirecting than others. My wife is really good at it. I'm probably not as good at it as her. But if they're not responsive to that redirection, obviously let the adult volunteer, if you're a youth, let the adult volunteer know. Let the staff know. So if you're running VBS, Chrissy, you'll know about that. And then if the behavior continues, then the parent or guardian will be called to meet with the appropriate staff member, right? And they will take the next appropriate step there. If it escalates into something that requires, and it doesn't have to be just that, but if there is an incident that requires first aid, could be just they fell on the playground, they had a bump, they bumped their head, they were transported to emergency care for some reason, maybe broke a bone. Anything like that where there's an incident, we list some of these out here, you know, youth get hurt, they get into a fight or something. We have incident reports in the office, and they're at the mailbox in there, and you fill it out. It tells kind of what day it happened, what happened. You describe it. It's a record-keeping thing. And Lynette, our business manager, Lynette Mobley, gets a copy of it, because if there is something where somebody broke an arm or something happened, you know, there's usually some additional information Lynette needs to get, and she'll also probably be in contact with the families and, you know, talk about insurance and other things that all comes up. So, any questions about incident reports? All right. Now we get to mandatory reporter training. So this is the new item. Even if you signed the handbook last year, this is the new thing. It's a requirement for volunteers who are 18 and older. So if you're VBS, Sunday school, youth group, nursery, anything with kids, I wouldn't say we don't expect ushers or greeters to sign that or communion assistants because that's kind of a differentiated group. But if you're in charge of a group of kids, if you're volunteering at the school, if you're coaching at the school, all of those kind of interactions with children, mandatory reporter training is a requirement in our volunteer handbook now. So we went round and round, had really good conversations with several groups, including attorneys, and talked through it. And the state statute's pretty vague. I'm not going to get into all the legalese of it, but DCFS, or Department of Children and Family Services, has come out with guidelines that speak to volunteers who work with children being covered by the mandatory reporter training. So now the good news is if you already work in a medical field, in a school environment, anywhere where children are normally at, your employer likely requires this already. So that you may have already completed this training. And it's required every 3 years. So if we take it today, it covers us for 3 years. It's similar to the background checks in that degree. It's also similar to the volunteer handbook acknowledgement that we'll cover as well. So there is a link to the state of Illinois mandatory reporter training in the presentation. We can send it out. Chrissy can send it to you, the actual hyperlink. In the handbook, obviously it's physical paper you have in front of you. We don't have the link there that's workable, but we can send it to you in an email. It informs you of the requirements if you suspect abuse and how to report it to the proper authorities. And it's free of charge. It does take 60 minutes to go through and understand it. A lot of this is stuff that you probably normally through common sense would see, but it gives you an awareness of, hey, what happens if I see this and what do I do? And now you act on that, okay? It doesn't always mean that, and one thing, I'm not gonna get into the training itself because that's not an expertise of mine, but just know that if you suspect there's abuse, it doesn't automatically mean people are getting hauled off and going to jail. It means they're gonna look into it and then they'll take the necessary steps, okay? So it's not on you to make that decision of what's gonna happen to people. It's, if you notice it and you follow this training, follow the steps to report it appropriately, okay? We will have on our acknowledgement form, we have an acknowledgement section where you check a box that you've completed the training. That's the requirement we have of you for volunteering. And again, that's where you're volunteering with youth. If you ever think you're gonna volunteer at Sunday school, VBS, the school, coach a team, nursery, any of that stuff, take the training, you're covered for 3 years. Any questions on mandatory reporter training? Yes, Bob.
So just to be clear, I'm understanding that at this point the ushers are not required to take this.
Yeah, so the question is, ushers are not required to take this. That is correct. If you were only ushering, then you would not be required to take that training.
Okay, and then what if you're working with Upward Bound in the concession stand? My wife and daughter they were doing that.
Yeah, so Upward, the question is Upward, if you're working with Upward in the concession stand. So if you're working in Upward, I would say we're gonna have everybody take the training just because you're in the environment there with all the kids. Understanding that, there's a little bit of a vagueness, you're not necessarily responsible for those kids when you're in the concession stand, but we don't know what could happen on that day where we might need you to fill in for something or have a different interaction. So I would, for safety's sake, I think 18-year-olds and older, take that training for an Upward instance.
Like your school district employee, which my wife is, she's taking this.
I would expect she's already taken this, and then you would just check it off that you've taken it, and you're good for the 3 years. So, yeah, that's our requirement. That's why there is some benefit, like if you're a doctor, medical field, right? You've probably already done this, and you can check it off and move on. So Bob said, if you have family that's a teacher, probably took it, make sure they're good, and they can check that on the acknowledgement. Any other questions on mandatory reporter training?
I do have a question.
All right, so Shelley's question is, sometimes kids may become friends with people in the Upward concession stand, but also, which we've covered and said, hey, they're in Upward, let's take the training, but also with ushers, there could be a relationship with somebody who's an usher, and who can they inform? So in that case, if you come across something, you suspect something's going on, even if you're a parishioner and suspect something's going on, tell someone on the staff. So all of our staff at the school or the church, our full-time and part-time staff, have taken mandatory reporter training, okay? So they know what to do as the immediate next step, and they will follow through on that. As soon as they're told about it, they follow through on it. So if you suspect something, even if you have a relative who is not volunteering at all, suspect something, and again, has some suspicion, they can tell the staff will act on that appropriately per the guidelines in the training. And you'll see this training when you take it, it goes through the things, what your requirements are and what your requirements aren't, and it'll lay that out. So again, I'm not the expert on that piece. I've taken the training, but I don't want to advise you one way or the other. DCFS has done a nice job. It is a 60-minute investment, so I appreciate you all taking that if you're in one of those volunteer roles that needs it. Any other questions on DCFS training or the mandatory reporter? All right. Acknowledgement. So at the end of the volunteer handbook, there's 2 additional pages then, page 17, and then we left page 18 blank intentionally, page 19. So 17 is the acknowledgement that you've read the handbook, and on there now it has the checkbox for you've taken the mandatory reporter training. If you're 18 or older, complete the training, again, for the roles we've talked about for volunteering. Check that box, print your name, sign it the first signature line and date it, and then go to page 19 and complete the background check form. Every 3 years, we will run a background check on individuals that are 18 or older, okay? So 3 steps for you. Sign the acknowledgement because you read the handbook. Check the box that you've taken the mandatory reporter training once you've taken it, and then fill out that page 19 as well with the background check. And we'll do that every 3 years. Lynette runs it. Some people, I understand, are very rightfully so protective of their social security number, which is on that form. We can work things out with Lynette so that she can run the background check, and you can feel safe about your social security number. If you're not worried about it, you can fill it out and put it on the form. It only goes to Lynette. So there's not anybody else in the church running anything with your social security number. And we don't store it in a system anywhere. We run your background check and make sure that you're clear, and then that's all that we keep is, hey, this is 3 years. We're good from this date. Any questions on that portion? Yes. So the question is, if we've done the background check in the last 3 years, do we still need to do it? We don't need to rerun your background check if we've run it in the last 3 years. So when it expires, we had a big push last year. So we expect most of those will expire in 3 years. But if you're new to a manual, then obviously fill it out. If you're just volunteering for the first time, fill it out. And then we'll run those background checks. Again, that's 18 years and older only. And then our staff will work through the list and make sure that we follow up with people as they start to roll off. It's usually going to be the beginning of the year that people start to roll, like your 3 years are up. Shelley has a question. Statement.
I got this a lot when I was director of government. Coach, just so you know, it is a criminal background check. It's not a credit check. It's not okay. And the piece of paper that you fill out after Lynette runs that check, your social security number is redacted. Okay, and they are locked in an archive room so that piece of paper doesn't have exposure to anybody else. And as soon as she's done, it gets blacked out. Your social security number is blacked out.
So Shelley clarified, yep, the background check is just a criminal background check. It is not a running of your credit report. And as soon as Lynette runs that report with your social security, if you complete the form and go that route with her, which is how most people do, she blacks it out with markers so you can't see it. They're locked in a safe location with our archive, and then we go from there. So there's nobody else has access to that information. Any other questions? Okay. So we'll move on to if you're under 18, so if you're one of our younger volunteers, skip the whole thing about the mandatory reporter training. You're under 18, you don't have to take that. You don't need to check the box. Print the name of the volunteer, and the parent signs on the second signature line and dates it. The kid does not sign it. The youth does not have to sign it. And there's no background check for anyone under 18. So it's much simpler, thankfully, for the under 18 group to be able to volunteer here, and different legal requirements there. Any questions on under 18 volunteers, under 18 years old? No. All right, so that is the end of the overview. Again, this is an overview. The actual handbook, you can read through it. Like I said, there's a couple pages in the front that are very important about vision, mission. It goes into that a little bit more. Just read through it. The training is the time investment. I understand that. I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it, that you're participating as a volunteer and helping with the ministry here at Emmanuel. If you have any questions, reach out to Chrissy, Shelley, myself, or anybody on the Board of Governance, and anyone on staff. If you have questions, we can figure out the answers for you. But thank you for what you do for volunteering. It's really important because we are heavily dependent on volunteers here. It is all about us reaching out into the community and making sure we have a safe environment, like we talked about. So thank you for your time tonight, and let us know if you have any questions. So thank you very much.